I'd just like to speak on this amendment in support real quick. The Department of Defense should not be giving money to propaganda machines. In fact, the only money that should be going from the Department of Defense anywhere is to lethality, not organizations ticked off that a conservative from Ohio might be calling out different branches for their focus on DEI or CRT, or a movement that is basically alienating conservatives and pushing conservatives outside of its ranks. I think that there are a lot of members who speak on these bills that are not service members or have no experience with the Department of Defense, and honestly, we in this governing body are not going to allow a wokeification of the Department of Defense. And frankly, with the near-peer threat that we have in the future, I think that it is increasingly important that we are focusing again on lethality and not woke nonsense that has no business in the NDAA.
A lot of this is coming from disputes that conservatives have. But you can't just say whatever you want to say. The people who tried to overturn the 2020 election are learning that. We have heard about the attack on this Capitol on January 6th. We have heard people say, oh, it didn't happen. It was Antifa. It was an inside job. It was government. All of these things are wrong, okay? Not, you say this, I say that. Wrong. Facts do exist, even if some of them turn out to be wrong. This amendment says, nah, we're giving up. We're not even trying to figure out what's true. Anything goes. Have fun with it. I don't think that's a good idea in general, but it is a particularly bad idea in our national security environment that we are in right now, because Russia and China love that approach.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise? I said, no. The gentlewoman from Florida.
Stand up. Put the damn flag away.
Okay. The gentlewoman is not recognized.
Why are you laughing? Mr. Beard, why are you laughing?
Because you said quote-unquote parents, as if they weren't really their parents.
Going back to a statement that Mr. Breer had made, you talk about intentional trauma and that the Trump administration caused intentional trauma by separating these children from their quote-unquote parents. You have no idea. Not only have you not been to the border,
I do have an idea.
Hold on,
I
I'm
do
not
have
done.
I've
I'm
met
not
with-
done. You have no idea if these people
Okay.
are their intentional parents or not.
Oh, yeah.
You have no
Yeah.
idea. That's exactly why we do family. Really? Are you psychic?
No,
Have you
we
won
do.
the lotto, Mr. Breer? I don't
No.
think you have.
Read the Office
I'm not,
of
no, I
Inspector
reclaim
General
my time.
report on family
You have no
separation.
idea what you're doing, and you are hurting these children. The reason why we want family separation until we can confirm if they
You
are the
want
actual
family
biological
separation?
parents is because these kids are being trafficked.
As
And
a father,
absolutely, I
that
do.
is
Excuse me, I'm a
frightening.
mother. We can go back and forth, but I'm done talking to you because what you did was destructive. Mr. Schiff exploited his position as chair of Intel Committee and every opportunity possible, threatening national security, undermining our duly elected president, and bringing dishonor upon the institution. This is not a partisan act. This is not a conservative versus liberal vote. This is a clear vote between right and wrong, and I urge you to do the right thing. If we run away from this opportunity to hold this man accountable, there is only one fault, and that is of ourselves. We will betray the people who trusted us and sent us here to do the right thing.
We're seeing the complete ethical collapse of a once great political party. The Republican Party began as a pro-freedom, anti-racist, pro-immigrant, anti-know-nothing party. It has become an authoritarian cult of personality, taking orders from an inciter of insurrection, a bully and braggart whose rage towards Mike Pence and whose spectacular disrespect for the rule of law endangered not only our entire constitutional order, but everyone in this room. The party of Lincoln and his Lincolnites has become the party of Luna and her Luna followers.
I'd just like to speak on this amendment in support real quick. The Department of Defense should not be giving money to propaganda machines. In fact, the only money that should be going from the Department of Defense anywhere is to lethality, not organizations ticked off that a conservative from Ohio might be calling out different branches for their focus on DEI or CRT, or a movement that is basically alienating conservatives and pushing conservatives outside of its ranks. I think that there are a lot of members who speak on these bills that are not service members or have no experience with the Department of Defense, and honestly, we in this governing body are not going to allow a wokeification of the Department of Defense. And frankly, with the near-peer threat that we have in the future, I think that it is increasingly important that we are focusing again on lethality and not woke nonsense that has no business in the NDAA.
A lot of this is coming from disputes that conservatives have. But you can't just say whatever you want to say. The people who tried to overturn the 2020 election are learning that. We have heard about the attack on this Capitol on January 6th. We have heard people say, oh, it didn't happen. It was Antifa. It was an inside job. It was government. All of these things are wrong, okay? Not, you say this, I say that. Wrong. Facts do exist, even if some of them turn out to be wrong. This amendment says, nah, we're giving up. We're not even trying to figure out what's true. Anything goes. Have fun with it. I don't think that's a good idea in general, but it is a particularly bad idea in our national security environment that we are in right now, because Russia and China love that approach.
I want to remind my colleagues that House Republicans have already argued that Merrick Garland must be held accountable for defying 2 lawfully issued subpoenas. Today's vote will hold Attorney General Garland in inherent contempt of Congress and fine him $10,000 per day until he complies with our subpoenas by turning over the audio tapes. If an American is presented with a lawful subpoena, he or she is expected that they comply or face the consequences of their defiance. Why should the Attorney General of the United States be held to a different standard? No one is above the law.
The hypocrisy on the other side is stunning. It takes my breath away, Mr. Speaker. Jim Jordan, Andy Biggs, Scott Perry, all ignored congressional subpoenas. I go right down the list. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, former Attorney General William Barr, former Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino, all ordered to testify. And what did they do? They ran and hid, following the lead, by the way, of their corrupter-in-chief, Donald Trump, who ignored his own congressional subpoena. It's like a national pastime for Republicans: golf, fishing, and ignoring subpoenas. And now they have the nerve to come down here and lecture anyone about the rule of law. Get lost. Get lost. Get out of here with this nonsense.
In this way would not deter illegal immigration. In fact, it encourages more individuals to take the dangerous trek across our borders illegally. And to put the cost of illegal immigration into perspective, illegal immigration has a net cost of approximately $151 billion per year. This cost is not incurred by illegal aliens that are coming to the United States, but instead paid for by hardworking Americans, while those breaking the law have zero financial accountability. And let's be clear, whenever they show pictures of DACA recipients, they typically tend to show Hispanic children, when in actuality it's more than just the Hispanic demographic. So I guess the question for you would be, you're in charge of a program that's costing American taxpayers millions and billions of dollars, and yet you're sitting here refusing to answer questions about whether or not that's fair, or there's certain terminology being used for these programs. I guess my suggestion to you would be is that our rules that we have in place are in place for a reason.
DACA is political, is what I heard just now. Just to be clear, you've testified that DACA recipients are considered to be lawfully present, correct?
That's correct. I've said that under the Department of Homeland Security's longstanding definition, DACA recipients are considered lawfully present.
Right, they're not considered illegals, they're considered to be lawfully present. But lawfully present doesn't mean that you have the right to vote, correct?
I would defer to my
well, I'll give it to you. Only U.S. citizens can vote. And so therefore, this idea that it's political, or as if the Biden administration is about to rack up some votes, is just another falsehood. In fact, all we continue to get is half-baked ideas and half-baked or half-lies or half-truths, whichever way you want to look at it. Let's talk about the half-baked ideas first, though. My colleague, Ms. Lee, brought up the fact that we're talking about expanding access to pregnant women and children, correct?
In the Medicaid program, yes.
Okay, and this is only in states that have extended Medicaid, correct?
This is under the proposal. This would impact the 35, roughly 35 states who have chosen the option to cover lawfully residing pregnant individuals as well as children.
Okay, so we're talking about pregnant women, and have you heard of the Dobbs decision?
I have.
Okay, all right, so we have a party that says, seemingly, what would Jesus do? Seemingly, that's how they govern themselves. And so they've decided that all women should just bear all the children and not have any rights to decide what they're going to do. And so even under this set of circumstances, they think that it's great that all women should just be pregnant, but they don't want them to have any access to health care. That sounds like a half-baked idea to me, to say that forget life when it comes to, say, the life of the mother, because that's a real thing. Because if you have health care, and I don't know how deeply you've delved into this, but we have been talking, and when I say we, I mean the Democrats, have been talking about the fact that we have a terrible maternal mortality rate in this country. And when you start talking about people of color or people of lower socioeconomic means, that rate goes up even more astronomically. And so the idea that people are already dying, let me be clear. Are there people that tend to be at a higher risk when they don't have access to health care when they're pregnant?
Yes, it is our belief that being insured leads to better health outcomes.
Thank you. Let's also just talk about these half-truths. Really, they're just full lies. I was trying to be nice. The reality is that they're trying to make this into the immigration boogeyman that they always talk about, yet we've yet to have a bill on the floor that has been proposed in the form of a policy around immigration. Instead, what they want to do is continue to treat immigrants as if they are the big, bad boogeyman. And so we're sitting here and we're talking about a program, and you've remained composed. So let me compliment you for that. Because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle continue to ask you about the border. What in this bill or this policy, this rule change, what in this rule change has anything to do with the border? Just give me one thing that it has to do with the border. One. Okay, exactly. It doesn't, right? It doesn't. But for some reason, they believe if they say it, that it's true. I would love to live in a world where whatever I say somehow is true. But the reality is that if they want immigration reform, they are in control of the House, and they can put a bill on the floor. But they don't want to do that because they want to continue to say that immigrants are the big bad boogeyman. Thank you for your service. This has nothing to do with immigration. It has everything to do with being good citizens and good lawmakers and good public servants who actually just give a darn about people. Thank you.
Instead of complying with the lawfully issued congressional subpoenas, Attorney General Garland refused to hand over unredacted audio recordings and materials. This is why House Republicans voted to hold Garland in criminal contempt of Congress. However, on June 14, 2024, the Department of Justice informed us that they would not uphold the law and prosecute the Attorney General for contempt of Congress. While we all expect the DOJ's response, the dangerous precedent it set cannot be overstated. In order for the House of Representatives to do its job, we must have access to the information that will allow us to make informed decisions on behalf of our constituents. With Attorney General Garland and the Department of Justice refusing to follow the law, we have been left with no choice but to rely on inherent contempt, our constitutional authority to hold an individual accountable for refusing to comply with congressional demands.
We don't try cases. There's no trial here. There's no demeanor evidence. As much as you may want to prosecute Joe Biden, there is no congressional prosecution of Joe Biden, and his demeanor evidence is no legitimate basis for this subpoena. Now, you of course know, and I don't even think you'd argue, that there's a legitimate legislative purpose to use the audio recordings in a political ad to support your dear leader, Mr. Trump. So that clearly falls outside of the range. Of course, my friends on the other side of the aisle should refocus from demeanor evidence to basic concepts like due process or executive privilege. Because the President of the United States asserted executive privilege over this audio tape. You may not like it, you may not agree with it, but you have no authority to determine that that is not a correct assertion of the executive privilege. And you know who else doesn't have authority to determine that? The Attorney General, who you are trying to hold in contempt. Due process. You're going to fine someone $10,000 without notice or an opportunity to be heard? You're going to say, we're going to fine you because, and you have no opportunity to make a defense, and there is no neutral adjudicator? You can go to court all you want, and that's where you went, and that's where you belong. And that's why this resolution is such bogus. But I have a warning for you, my friends. You will reap what you sow. In June of 2019, then President Donald Trump said he would, quote, defy all congressional subpoenas. And that is exactly what he did. During the first impeachment investigation, every single executive branch agency defied a lawful subpoena from Congress.
Gentleman's time has expired. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair.
I yield the gentleman an additional 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
The State Department was subpoenaed, the Defense Department, not a single document. So I look forward to whoever one day is the Republican Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense to be held in contempt and fined, inherent contempt and fined $10,000. There were more than a dozen witnesses who refused to comply with the subpoena. And I'm not even talking about the 5 House Republicans who defied subpoenas in the last Congress that were determined by a court to be lawful and who would also be subject to inherent contempt because, of course, if this case where the audio tape is not provided, then blowing off a subpoena is definitely contempt. So you ought to be careful about the precedent you're setting because it is going to hurt you and your dear leader far more than us. I yield back.
Instead of complying with the lawfully issued congressional subpoenas, Attorney General Garland refused to hand over unredacted audio recordings and materials. This is why House Republicans voted to hold Garland in criminal contempt of Congress. However, on June 14, 2024, the Department of Justice informed us that they would not uphold the law and prosecute the Attorney General for contempt of Congress. While we all expect the DOJ's response, the dangerous precedent it set cannot be overstated. In order for the House of Representatives to do its job, we must have access to the information that will allow us to make informed decisions on behalf of our constituents. With Attorney General Garland and the Department of Justice refusing to follow the law, we have been left with no choice but to rely on inherent contempt, our constitutional authority to hold an individual accountable for refusing to comply with congressional demands. I would like to remind my colleagues that that this Congress is not subordinate to the executive branch. It never has been and it never will be. This resolution will protect the integrity and independence of the legislative branch. And to each one of my colleagues, your constituents and this institution are relying on you to be on the right side of law and order.
Mr. Speaker, this is a stupid resolution. Republican leadership knows this is a stupid resolution. Their own members know this is a stupid resolution, but they're beholden to the craziest MAGA members in their conference. And so this is what we get. Stupid resolutions on the floor because they're too chicken to stand up to the extremism in their own party. The Attorney General turned over the exact transcripts of the interviews that Republicans demanded. But that wasn't good enough because this isn't about a dispute over a recording. Let's be real. Republicans want to get these recordings because they think the RNC can use them in attack ads. This is Republicans weaponizing the government to go after their political opponents, and it is sick. It is sick. And now they have the nerve to come down here and lecture anyone about the rule of law. Get lost. Get lost. Get out of here with this nonsense. And contrast what Republicans did with what Attorney General Garland is doing. Not only is he taking this subpoena seriously, he's doing his best to comply. He has legitimate concerns about releasing the tape after the transcript has already been made public. He's not ignoring it like they do on their side. In fact, he made the entire underlying report public. He made the transcript public. He allowed the special counsel to testify in public for hours to explain his investigation. He sent a detailed letter supported by the facts, the law, and the precedent detailing why he would not release the audio recording. Because our side respects the rule of law, while the other side uses it as a phony talking point. And by the way, not only is this resolution a BS political stunt, it's not even a good BS political stunt. This is a bad resolution that could do massive damage to this institution's standing. If they go down this road, Mr. Speaker, if this half-baked idea actually passes, this House will almost certainly lose, doing irreparable damage to our own constitutional authority. So I guess you can pat yourselves on the back. Well done. Not only have you cooked up a stupid, unserious plan, you cooked up a stupid, unserious plan that will undermine any future legitimate attempts to use all our tools when it comes to contempt proceedings.
Gentlemen, suspend. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
To ask that the words be stricken.
Here, take it down.
Massachusetts will be seated. Clerk, report the words.
Speaker, I just want to say for the record that this is the second time there's been an attempt to silence me by the freedom-loving Republican conference. So much for the First Amendment. We have a presumptive nominee for president facing 88 felony counts, and we're being prevented from even acknowledging it. These are not alternative facts. These are real facts. A candidate for President of the United States is on trial for sending a hush money payment to a porn star to avoid a sex scandal during his 2016 campaign, and then fraudulently disguising those payments in violation of the law. He's also charged with conspiring to overturn the election. He's also charged with stealing classified information, and a jury has already found him liable for rape in a civil court. And yet, in this Republican-controlled House, it's okay to talk about the trial, but you have to call it a sham.
We take down his words.
It's okay to say the jury is rigged.
Mr. Speaker, I demand that his words be taken down.
It's okay to say the court is corrupt.
Gentleman will suspend.
But not Trump is corrupting the rule of law.
Indiana, to demand that his words be taken down.
I get it. They are desperate to distract from their failures. Their own members are saying that they've done nothing. And clearly they've deserted the American people in deference to Trump. And I get it. They want to distract from Project 2025.
Gentlemen will suspend.
Yeah.
The chair would remind members to refrain from engaging in personalities toward presumptive nominees for the office of president.
Okay. I'm trying to think what I can say. I get it. They want to distract from Project 2025, distract from their own nationwide abortion bans, distract from their giveaways to big donors and special interests. And what do we get? We get unserious stuff like this on the floor. And I would just say to the American people, you might not agree with Democrats on everything. You might not think we're perfect, but we are focused on our job. We're focused on fighting inflation, focused on getting prices down, focused on bringing jobs back from overseas, on standing up for democracy, and on protecting the freedom of our constituents. And contrast that with what Republicans are focused on, wasting more time on political stunts instead of working with us to get things done. It is as simple and as sad as that. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I urge a no vote on this, I got to take this word out now, on this resolution, and I reserve.